So welcome, everybody. I have to tell you, I am really excited about this opportunity to talk about this. I also am going to be completely honest. I welcome your feedback. We are at the very nascent stages of sort of putting this all together and rolling this out. And so any help you can offer me, I would gratefully receive it. Edward, I would love to have some of the stuff that you just talked about to include, because I think that just flows so nicely into what we're doing. I am a longtime environmentalist and feel very strongly that this, as a Christian, which is my background, this is something I am called to do, to care for creation. And one of the reasons is because I think my responsibility to my siblings is so important. And it ends up that our Black and brown siblings are the ones that are most impacted by environmental degradation, right? And so I'm married. We have three grown children, and I think they know that I care very deeply about this. I went to seminary late in life, just a couple of years ago, graduated just a couple of years ago, and got a certificate in environmental theology, which is an exciting way to look at scripture, right? To look at scripture, Hebrew scriptures, New Testament scriptures through an environmental lens. So and I'm a member of Bryn Mawr Presbyterian Church, and I just concluded a stint as a pastor at Church on the Mall, which is a Presbyterian church in the Plymouth Meeting Mall. That said, I would like to take you on a trip through what the Environmental Justice Committee at Bryn Mawr Presbyterian Church has been doing. And Chuck's going to keep an eye on questions. So if anybody has any questions as we go along, don't hesitate to interrupt. Okay. So the idea of planting native and using native plants is a part of the restoration of creation. Will admit I'm a big Doug Tolomei fan, and Doug is one of the founders of Homegrown National Park. And I saw this as an opportunity, and the Environmental Justice Committee agreed to engage our faith community and our larger community, because I think this has to be bigger than just one church. So I heard recently from Mike Weilbacher. Some of you may know him. He was the former head of the Lower Merion Conservancy, and he now is the executive director of the Schuylkill Center for Wildlife Education. And I wanted to be fair and give him credit for this. We spoke just recently, and he talked about the fact that looking at creation care, there are three things that he saw that were looming large on the horizon. One is climate change, one is access to clean water, and one is biodiversity. And the thing that I observe about climate change, and I've always been somebody who thought that somehow I could make a difference in climate change, and I think that I can, but climate change is a multi-generational issue, right? And it's easy for people to stick their head in the sand because they look at this and they say, this is just too big to deal with. Clean water access is something that I think is absolutely critical to consider. I think there are other areas of the country that have more consideration of what it means to have water. I do observe that living on the main line in many, many ways is a bit like living in a bubble. We have not, in spite of the weather today, which I do think is a part of weather weirdness, we have not been affected by fires or floods or hurricanes or tornadoes to an extent. It's somewhat an insular place environmentally. So people are not thinking about big picture items. But the one thing about biodiversity that I love is that anybody can do it. A child can plant a native plant in their yard. A senior can go out and spend time in the garden. Anybody can do this. I'm actually in touch with a community in Philadelphia that's doing planter gardening. And we're going to share this information with them, the idea that you can do this in planters as well. And the idea of extending biodiversity. So many areas of our community and our country have been developed. And so there are no longer areas of native plantings to offer food and shelter to native insects. And many of us know, and many of us have heard Doug Tolomei speak, and we know how important it is to have biodiversity. It starts with the plants, because insects can only digest native plants. And so the Bradford pears that we see that are starting to bloom now, that are beautiful, have very, very few insects that can eat them and survive just on them. So what we're going to do at Bryn Mawr Presbyterian Church to start is we're going to identify our native species. And I would encourage you to do the same thing on your church campuses and also at home. Also, businesses can do this. So the Environmental Justice Committee of the Bryn Mawr Presbyterian Church determined that the best way to draw attention to native species is to identify them on our own campus. And what we're going to do, you can see the beautiful tag there that was created by our own Jerry Tootin. And that is going to go in the ground and identify all the native species on the Bryn Mawr Presbyterian Church campus. So each native planting will be identified and it will be marked, and the marker on the back will provide a QR code that offers a link to further information on that native plant. We're going to then have a period of congregational education explaining why native species are important and how to proceed to adding native species to existing home plantings. So the idea with this program is that you don't have to start from the beginning. You don't have to say, oh my gosh, now I need to rip out all my plants and put in a native garden. You just need to add native species. And there are many native species and they are beautiful. I am excited to announce that Doug Tolomei will be joining us on Sunday, October 23rd for 2 sessions, one at 11:15 and one at 2 p.m. We were thinking the 2 p.m. might be more accessible to community members, but you can come to either or both. Doug's going to share his expertise with the congregation and with the community about the importance of native species and the role each of us can play in increasing the biodiversity of our yards and the campuses of our faith institutions. I see some questions in the chat. Chuck, you're monitoring that. So this is how we started with our Environmental Justice Committee, with a landscape design plan of the campus to identify the native species. So here are the plantings. And then here is a list of the names of the plantings. And what we did is we took this list, and I'll be honest, they're not all native. And so we relied on one of our, somebody who knows way more about gardening than I do, and she went through and identified those that were native. So we have 1 red maple, we have 2 eastern redbuds, 1 swamp oak, a red cedar, white pine, hydrangea, wild ginger, coral bells, sweet William, foam flowers. And then I found links to websites that show the plant in bloom, talk a little bit about its dimensions, how big it grows, how it survives best with full sun, partial sun, or shade, that kind of thing. And then on our marker, which on the front says native plant, on the back will be a QR code that takes you to those links. And it will also list the common name of the plant. So all the native species will be marked. And the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to make these markers available with the BMPC website and our link, so that we can hand these out at, for example, NARB Earth Days, so that folks can see what we're doing. Are there any questions? We're good, Chuck? You're muted.
There are a couple of people who have put resources in the chat.
Great.
Ed Lynn and Carl Dupault and Susie Hook just made a comment that Dianthus barbatus is not a native to America, very pretty, but not native.
Okay.
Susie, can you say something about what leads to that observation? Is it based upon area or some other definitional situation?
I was a landscape designer before I retired and have a minor degree in horticulture, and I just didn't think it was native, and I quickly looked it up, and it's most species are, especially the showy one, are in European. I think there's one it said just now that's native to the Arctic. It's no biggie. Our gardens at our church have a mix of natives and non-natives, but I just
right. And so I appreciate that. So these are all the species. These are all the plants. And then these are the ones that have been identified as native. So I don't see, right?
Oh, maybe I'm Sweet William. That's the.
Oh, Sweet William is not a native?
Let me just check if it's the same thing
Okay.
as. I might be. So it's not a big point. So anyway.
No, but it's worth knowing because.
Yeah, Sweet William, the scientific name is Dianthus barbatus. That's what I was just assuming, but I had to go back and check.
Okay.
I'm going to look it up, but I don't think variegated Solomon seal is native either.
You don't think what?
I think variegated Solomon seal, it's confusing. Solomon seals are frequently native. I think variegated Solomon seal isn't, but I'm going to look it up right now.
Interesting. Thank you. I would appreciate any information is appreciated. Thank you.
So I just have a quick questions for
Sure.
that type of thing. Like where like you have a variation, like a variegated variation. Does that affect the insects?
I can answer that if you like.
Yes, Ed, thank you.
Courtney, go ahead though, if you want.
No, go ahead, Ed.
Okay, well, it's complicated. Basically, straight species are generally the best thing to go with, the ones that you see actually out in the environment. Cultivars of native plants are called nativars, and it's been studied extensively. And for example, ones that tend to be a darker, redder color than green, and there's various characteristics that make them more or less appealing to wildlife. Wild ones does not support nativars. We're about species, but we're not fanatics or anything. Like I have a little Joe pieweed, that gets lots of pollinators. But so anyway, it's a complicated answer, but the simple answer is go with species natives if you can. You'll know a species native because it won't have some little name after the plant, like Little Joe or something like that. So, but don't be discouraged. Just don't be a purist. Just do the best you can. Almost anything is better than the current landscaping paradigm. Almost anything is better than having grass which you're not walking on.
Thank you. Thanks, Ed. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Oops.
I have a quick question, if I can. This is
Yes.
Tim. Yeah. What is the difference on the impact between a native plant and a naturalized one? Wouldn't the
Oh,
naturalized?
all
one
the
be-
difference in the world. Naturalized means they're from another country or another region, and they've just kind of,
But so what if it's environmentally good?
And so,
I mean,
I can
well,
actually, I
no,
can
go ahead.
answer
I'm
that.
sorry.
So- No,
Don't let
so
me
that's
take
okay.
over.
So, for example, we have swamp white oaks in our front yard. And if you look at a swamp white oak and it can host up to 200 different varieties of native caterpillars. And so what you might think is, I don't really want bugs, but these aren't bugs, these are insects. And these insects feed birds and which feed other animals, which creates this biodiversity. If you have a Bradford pear, that perhaps can host 20 different varieties of insects. A ginkgo can host 0 varieties of insects. So the important thing of planting native species is to support the native wildlife, the native insects primarily. And pollinators is something that's big and is being talked about. And so having species that are native and offer opportunities for pollinators is good too. But it's really about the digestive tract of the insect being able to eat the plant. Does that make
As an
sense?
example, dandelions are naturalized.
Right,
It just
but
means there's a lot of them.
Does that make sense?
Sometimes the word naturalized is used otherwise, like when you talk about a naturalized detention basin, just which means that you planted it and it usually implies native plants, but otherwise I'd agree.
Yeah, point taken. Thanks.
Okay. So it sounds like we have some experts on the call, and I know that we do. Doug Ptolemy really is somebody who is well known for books on biodiversity. His first book, Bringing Nature Home, really explains this idea of why it's important to plant native and how insects can only digest these native plants. So a little bit about him. He's a professor in the Department of Entomology and Wildlife Ecology at the University of Delaware. He advocates for home gardens that create a holy greenway. And I use that term because I think as people of faith, this is a call for us to help create this. And what he's suggesting is that as homeowners, as owners of even small pieces of property, we have the ability to bridge gaps between parks and preserves by providing native habitat for native species. He makes connections between plants and insects and how those relations are important to birds and other species. He calls for smaller lawns. He points to us planting more native plants. And he has overseen many rigorous field studies that examine native versus non-native. And he is one of the founders of Homegrown National Park. I saw recently he did a program for Jenkins Arboretum. And he talked about his latest book, which is The Nature of Oaks. And I didn't get to stay for the whole thing, but it was an oak tree in his backyard that he took pictures of every month. And he just talked about the oak tree. He's a big proponent of oaks as native species in this area. And so the idea of biodiversity is not a new idea. It's not a new term. Thomas Lovejoy coined the term in the 1980s. And ever since then, E.O. Wilson has worked diligently for decades to convince and convict us to the understanding that we cannot live without biodiversity. And so Homegrown National Park's grassroots initiative is our call to action to help regenerate that biodiversity. Ptolemy believes to achieve Wilson's dream is to coexist with nature in the same place at the same time. And to do this, we must bury forever the notion that humans are here and nature is someplace else. So somebody was talking about the idea of a paradigm shift in thinking, right? That's what this is. Because there is no longer someplace else to meet the world's needs. We have persisted for the last half century in the misguided belief that humans can only thrive when segregated from the natural world. And as a result, the US has formally protected only 12% of its land. Ptolemy believes that we can achieve Wilson's lofty goals, and the key to doing this is to practice conservation, not only in protected wildlands, but also outside of parks and preserves where we live, work, farm, and play. Chuck, you had a question?
It's just a comment. Haley Brundage comment put an item in the chat that says that Doug is coming to Marywood College, I guess that is, on April 7th, which is the school I attend. Very excited to attend his presentation. So
Yeah, he's great.
Haley, if you want to put your email in the chat, then people could get in touch with you if they, or I'll send the notice to Courtney.
That would be great. Thanks, Haley. Congratulations on getting him to come up there. So a little bit about Homegrown National Park, and I'm also going to show some screenshots of the Homegrown National Park website. There are a lot of resources on that website. So Homegrown National Park is a grassroots call to action to regenerate biodiversity and ecosystem function by planting native plants and collecting new ecological networks. And so the mission is this regeneration of biodiversity that's been removed by shrinking parks and sanctuaries and communal lands, the increase of lawns, which is really a scourge to biodiversity. And Homegrown National Park says that every human being on this planet needs a diverse, highly productive ecosystem to survive. So it's talking about our survival as well, right? They are working on this being a collective effort of individual homeowners, property owners, land managers, farmers, and anyone else with soil to plant in. This includes faith institutions, to start new habitats by planting native plants and removing most invasive plants as well. So they claim that it's the largest cooperative conservation project that has ever been conceived or attempted. Our initial goal is 20 million acres of native plantings, and that we are at a critical point of losing so many species from local ecosystems and their ability to produce the oxygen, clean water, flood control, pollination, pest control, carbon storage, et cetera, that the ecosystem that sustains us requires. So small efforts by many people. These are just a few images of what I understand to be local native species. And I think, so did you say Joe Pye weed is not native? Did somebody say
Oh, no,
that?
it's definitely native. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, good.
I was
Yeah.
just talking about a cultivar, a native called Little Joe.
Oh,
It's
okay.
just a
There are a
smaller
lot of
version.
cultivars of Joe Pye, yeah.
Okay. That's what I was confused about. I think there's a general thought that you can't have pretty gardens if you only use native species, but you can have pretty gardens, I think, with native species. And so these are some resources for recommendations for native plants. homegrownnationalpark.org/resource has a lot. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to send out this PowerPoint to share the information that I have. What I will do is, for those of you who have generously added things to the chat, I will update this and then send it out. Okay. So thank you for in advance for your work. Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center has great resources for our area. as does the Audubon Native Plant Database, National Wildlife Federation Native Plant Finder, and Native Plant Finder. It's the same, that's the same thing. And then there's some websites that talk about invasive plants that you can avoid. These are some local resources for native plants that are in our extended area. So from Quakertown out to New Jersey, over to Spring Grove, Pennsylvania. So if anybody has a good native garden store that they like, you can let me know that too.
Courtney?
Yes.
I know my wife and I we used to go to the Jenkins Arboretum plant sale every first Saturday in May. And they would have quite a few native species. And we try to buy as many native azaleas as we can. And you know, when you first look at them, they look a little bit scrawny, but I think they're really beautiful. And I think it just takes a little visual adjustment, a little mental visual adjustment to appreciate their beauty, but they are very beautiful.
Thank you, Chuck. And I meant to point out that Jenkins Arboretum has a native plant kit. And the last day to order those is March 31st. And here is the link, and you will have it by tomorrow via email. Okay, so that's the link. And the Schuylkill Center for Environmental Education had their native plant sale opened on March 23rd. So those were the two dates that were specific to these resources. One thing I would love for our folks to do, and we're going to encourage people to do at our church, is take before and after pictures. Now, these are pretty dramatic. It doesn't have to be this dramatic, but there are lots of different opportunities to include native plantings in your garden. Okay, so Homegrown National Park, this is just a screenshot. We can do this one person at a time. And so this is what we're asking our members of the church at Bryn Mawr Presbyterian Church and in the community, because as I said before, I think this needs to go beyond just Bryn Mawr Presbyterian. And the one thing I'll say about BMPC is that we're rolling out this project on April 24th with the Visual Arts Committee at Bryn Mawr is hosting Diane Burko, who is an artist. She's an American painter and photographer. She's currently based in Philadelphia and Bucks County, and her work addresses landscape, climate change, and environmental activism. So her art will be on display, and the Environmental Justice Committee will begin this rollout of sharing information on the native species and on the church campus and encouraging people to plant native at home. You can register your native plants on the Homegrown National website. You click on Get on the Map. You go in and click on Pennsylvania. You can see the Pennsylvania map where the darkened quadrants are where people have registered. You can see that there are 363 active zip codes in Pennsylvania, 52 active counties. This is the number of plants, and this is the plant acreage. So almost 10,000 acres is what they're, and this is just based on your guesstimate of what you're using. This is Chester County. All these little fireflies indicate that in 23 zip codes, there are 98 users. that are registered in this database. I think I have one more. And there you go. There's something for Delaware County. So this is actually Delaware, Chester, and Montgomery County. So you can see that there are lots of registrations, but we'd like there to be more. And another thing I wanted to mention is that Bryn Mawr, after we announced this in April, we're going to tag the plants. We're going to have education in the fall, not only with Doug Ptolemy, but also information that that I actually got here from resources that we heard when we listened to Leslie Bass, who talked to us about planting native. And Leslie, you were part of the inspiration for this. So thank you. Chuck?
Susie asked the question, does anyone know sources of expertise on detention basins? We naturalized ours in 2009 with grant money at our church. I know, Susie, I belong to the Valley Forge chapter of Trout Unlimited, and we've done a couple of basins, one in East Whiteland in particular was done in 2006. And was the expertise you were talking about in terms of plants or the hydrology of the basins?
Anything to do with having successful rain garden native plantings. I found the biggest challenge seems to be invasive plants coming in, and so I'd be maybe, if you could share your contact information, I could find out more about your experience later.
I just want to say that any of us who are dealing with local issues, please be aware that the same issues are being faced by people across the country and the world. So we need to form coalitions, and the Penn. I would recommend that you get in touch with Penn State Extension for one thing. But wild ones may be helpful. The Pennsylvania Native Plant Society is someone to reach out to. If you email me, I will try to help you make connections on this.
Okay, Ed, right?
Yeah.
Courtney, are you sending us these emails, or are we supposed to pick them up off the chat?
I'll include the chat in my follow-up email.
Oh,
So,
sorry.
but just make sure I have all your emails so that you get this important information.
Margaret made the observation that oaks are able to suck up great amounts of water, which is helpful in a state such as Pennsylvania. Anything more you want to say about that, Church Margaret? You're muted if you do.
Yeah, I was trying to fix that. I'm trying to think how many tons, maybe you know the figure, but it's an incredible amount of water they're able to suck up. And I think that, if they're vulnerable locations where there's flooding or mudslides or something or other, where it would be very worrisome if it, builds up issues with flood water. That is one thing to keep in mind, I think, oak trees. And they've been special, and I think they've been a special tree throughout history, the Druids and so forth. And in Scotland, they had some bad penalties for people that messed up with the oak trees. There's a constructive angle to them, very much, yeah.
Leslie?
Thanks for the mention of Penn State. And also there's another group of volunteers called Master Watershed Stewards.
Absolutely, good point.
And they are very good for helping, focusing on riparian buffers and stream stabilization, use of native plants, but also they may have something about the detention basins. I'm not sure about that, but I would look into that. Montgomery County now has master watershed stewards, and probably, I don't know if Chester County or Delaware counties do, but
They do.
I would look into that,
Hey, thank you.
Mhm. Thanks for the compliment too.
DEP has funded a lot of detention basin restoration.
What has, I didn't hear you, I'm sorry.
The Department of Environmental Protection.
Oh, yeah, DEP, yeah.
Under Growing Greener grants. And I'm sure that they've probably had seminars. I don't know about the last couple of years, but
That's where we got some of our grant money that we used to buy plants for our detention basin.
yeah.
Their Aqua Pennsylvania program, I think. But this was quite a while ago now.
There's a farm up in Phoenixville run by Michelle Adams. And I'm just blanking on the name of the firm right now.
That's Meliora Inc. That's
Right.
Meliora is a design stormwater management expertise that's very impressive. I'm working with Michelle on many things.
Yeah, she's great.
Well, thank you. This is helpful to me. I appreciate it. I don't mean to distract from the main part of the presentation, but this was actually a church project of ours, 13 years ago. And now I've seen some of the difficulties that occur in large scale restoration type things.
Courtney, I had a question. Are there any places on your campus where there are things you'd like to get rid of?
So,
It's the flip side of
so
your program.
that's a great question. And I've got to say, I'm going to tread lightly on that. Environmental Justice met once with the landscape design architect, and they told us what they were going to do. And we offered some suggestions, and some of those came to fruition and some of them did not. And so I think we're looking at what we have and working with that rather than trying to change things around right at this very point. We're celebrating the native species that we have in place.
Mhm.
And I know that there are faith communities that are more hands-on, and it's the folks in the faith community that keep the garden going. And so that is not necessarily the case with Bryn Mawr. So for us to step in and say, we're going to do this differently, it's not up to environmental justice to do that.
Yeah.
Is this something that you all, so I heard, Susie, you said that you did this years ago at your.
Yeah, I'm a member of the Bucksmont Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Warrenton, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And we have a 3-acre property on a creek. And this was before I was familiar with Mr. Talmy's work. But, we applied for grants and got several $1,000s worth, and our property was almost entirely lawn to start with. And now it's, some lawns for use by the congregation, but so we got several hundred natives, and we did buy from some of the nurseries that are mentioned there, like Redbud and especially Octoraro Nursery, small. And mostly there's been a lot of success, but keeping the invasives under control is a very severe problem for us, because they just come in and with the poison ivy, which wouldn't technically be an invasive because it's a nice native plant that feeds wildlife, it's hard for our folks to get out there and take care of everything the way we'd like to. So
How much land do you have?
our property is about 3 acres. And I'd say maybe a third of that is building and parking lot. And the rest of
Okay.
it is, we have, the detention basin, which is about 200 feet by 80. And then we have a big riparian area all along the creek. And then we have a more formal celebration garden, which has got native big trees and big shrubs, but we also use non-natives ornamentals, for fanciness. And then we have a variety of other gardens around the parking lot and stuff.
Susie, I would suggest that if you get a chance, you should make notes and put together a description of your experience on your site, and particularly the problems you've had and what you were able to overcome and what you weren't. That would be of great interest to a lot of people, I would suggest.
Yes.
No, I do that. I have a history of our gardens that I wrote quite a few years ago, but I haven't updated it recently. I will say that a lot of things have been very successful. We started with these small 18-inch octoraro restoration sized plants, and the pawpaw trees are now like 25, 30 feet tall after 13 years. And we have bur oaks we planted in 2011 as tiny plants, and they're now like 30 feet tall. And they, instead of having acorns at age 35, they had them at age 3 or 4. And so all this presents challenges.
Well, I think that a lot of people are interested in that sort of thing. And if you could share it with others, that would be great.
Well, I'll think about that. Thank you for your interest. I appreciate it.
Courtney, I have,
Congratulations on your garden there at Bucksmont, by the way. It sounds fantastic.
Thank you.
Pam?
yeah. So it sounds like you're trying to do more than just your church. You're actually trying to get your congregation educated. And are you trying to get them to be part of the homegrown parks? And how are you doing that? I think that's an awesome idea.
So we're going to educate them about, we're going to have some programs in the fall around Doug Ptolemy being with us, maybe
Perfect.
2 other programs, talking about the very basics. Leslie, what you went over with us, and maybe we'll even talk to and see if you can come and join us for a session, because you made the idea of planting native seem so accessible. It seemed to me like it wasn't a hard thing. It wasn't a heavy lift. And I am looking at this project as something that is accessible to almost anybody, right? Almost anybody can do this. So, Ed, I see your hand, and just let me say one more thing to Pam. The other thing, Pam, is I don't just want our members to do it. I want all of you to recruit people to do this. This is so, I'll champion this because while I still think working against climate change is so critical, and I think the idea of paying attention to clean water is going to be at some point like fossil fuels are now, right? How important people think fossil fuels are. Water is going to be as precious as that. This is something I think everybody can do. It's not overwhelming. It's not terribly expensive. Doug talks about taking an acorn and planting an acorn to start an oak tree. So I just think there's such a breadth of opportunity in this idea for people that care about creation. And I know right here, I'm preaching to the choir. I know that. I see all your faces and I love you for being here and for helping me think this through. So,
Courtney?
yes. So let me go to Ed. He had something, and then Jerry, I'll come to you.
You're muted, Ed.
I have to sign off, but this is great. Courtney, I would like to introduce you to Pastor Randy Bush of East Liberty Presbyterian Church, which is a huge
Oh.
church near us. And
Yeah.
the thing is, this is very clear to me knowing about it. I was no expert even like 2-3 years ago. I'm still not. But the thing is that I would say only 5% of people get this. Less than that actually do it. So I would like you to consider that this could be the single best use of your time. And there's tremendous opportunity for leadership, like, getting people to transition community gardens or make new community gardens. It's just the opportunity of a lifetime, and it's rapidly growing, but we're not there yet. I mean, most people don't know this or do this. So I just want to thank you all, and I enjoy this very much, and let's stay in touch.
Thank you, Ed. Did you leave us your email? Did you leave me your
Yes,
email?
a couple of
Great.
places.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate
And
it.
yeah, check out your own Wild Ones group. It's
And
fabulous.
we have actually.
Okay,
we have.
good.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, Jesse,
absolutely.
say hi to Jesse Schiffler for me, please.
Okay. Jerry, thank you.
Good night. Thanks so much.
Wait, don't leave, Ed.
Oh, okay. All right.
I just want to say that I grew up in Pittsburgh and went to Sunday school all the way through at East Liberty Presbyterian Church.
Oh,
and
for
we got
goodness
married.
sakes.
And I feel like crying. This is all coming together so much. And yeah, we got married there. I love that church. We knew Stuart and I Hutchinson there.
Oh,
You
wow.
know,
How about
and
that?
Dr. Rothschild was a dear friend. And why I tuned in here with Courtney was just to say that just by starting a few plants, we're encouraging the congregation. They can keep their lawns. They can keep as much of their lawn. But if they just take a little corner and put in a few native plants just to make a corridor going from yard to yard so the insects have a chance.
Yeah, and the thing is, we focus on, our native plants are, beautiful and all that sort of thing. But the main thing is, if you can have ruby-throated hummingbirds come to your garden.
Yeah.
You can have monarch butterflies there, and more and hundreds of species of. I'm not a religious person, but God or whatever has put hundreds of different species of native bees in there. It's just fascinating. I mean, it's such a better way to garden. So,
Yay.
Yeah.
Thank you for your encouragement. I appreciate
thank you.
it.
Let's stay in touch, please.
Okay, I'd love it.
I'm going to introduce you to Randy Bush. Okay.
Great.
And
Yes.
his lovely wife.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll do that right now.
Thank you,
Okay.
Ed.
Thank
Joel?
you. Bye.
I just
Bye.
wanted to say I've been on the Environmental Justice Committee for a number of years, and after I retired in 2015, I got very interested in climate change, and I've been working on that. But then Courtney introduced me to Doug Talamay, and I looked at some of his talks on YouTube, and I was really amazed at how attractive his ideas are. And I think it's he's a teacher. I didn't really know how important native plants were, and it's not only the insects, but it's the birds. And he mentions in this talk I listened to that the birds are in decline, and he thinks that part of the reason is because a lot of birds, especially when they're laying eggs, require caterpillars. They won't there are seed birds, but even a lot of seed birds don't get enough energy except from caterpillars, and caterpillars feed on vegetation, including trees, and they are well adapted, to native plants, and the native plants are adapted to them. And if you put in art, which more and more people are putting in non-native plants, and no one realizes that, if you do that, you're going to be killing birds as well as insects. And we do have an insect crisis also. So, and as we develop, he made, as Courtney mentioned, he made a big point of, we all have to become ecologists and understand this is not simply, to make your place look more beautiful, which it will in a lot of ways, but it's to for survival. You know, we can't live without insects and we can't live without birds. I mean, we just can't do it. So as we take over more and more wilderness areas and native plant areas and put them on natural plantings there, things are going to get worse. So I think it's if no one, and I'm an ecologist, and I didn't realize how important that was until Courtney brought it up. So I think it's for the general congregation or anywhere. I think for the general population, his ideas, if people start to realize, maybe they will get rid of their lawns eventually because they realize they're saving birds, saving insects, and eventually saving humans. You know, it's that important. So I think it's along with climate change, it's a very important issue.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you. We're coming to the end of our time. Again, I have never seen such an active chat, so I'm really grateful for that. I will copy this chat and share it in an email tomorrow, along with my updated PowerPoint from all your resources. And Leslie, I don't know if I've done it yet, but I fully intended to go back to you sent me a lot of resources, and I want to include those as well. So I'm not ignoring you. I just didn't have time to get it all together, but I will.
I did have one little thing I wanted. I'm thinking about how we're talking about the future, aren't we? So we should really be also making a great effort to involve children in this whole effort. And I was just thinking, you were talking about the question of, is it hard or is it easy? You could say something like, it's so easy a child can do it. A child will do it. And then you could have a child planting Asclepias tuberosa, which is, the butterfly weed. And then they're going to see monarchs there, and they're going to see a chrysalis. They're going to see caterpillars and a chrysalis. And there you go. It doesn't take much to hook a child on something like this. So I think we really need to think of not just the concepts, but the actual engagement of the next generations.
Thank you. So I have chills. I think that's true. I think you're right.
Courtney, can you include me on the list?
Yes, Marge, thank you. I actually have you on you're our next circle to get information on what we're doing. So thank you so much. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Joel, your hand's still up. Are you finished? Okay.
That was part of the other one. Sorry.
Okay.
I'll put
No,
it
that's
down.
okay.
Lower the hand. I think, did I lower it?
Yep. Chuck, were you going to say something?
Just that we're, for future programming, we're talking with Ron Celentano, who's a longtime solar consultant very active in the state of Pennsylvania, an advocate, and he's going to get back to us with what he suggests he could present. And then we're working on some programs for May and June. And then we'll take a couple months off in the summer. Pam, do you want to say anything about the?
So I'm working to get somebody to speak to us about green burials, and they say yes and then they don't get back to me, but we have a really excellent green burial place in West Laurel Hill. And they say that they can do it, but I haven't been able to secure it. I'm shooting Chuck for June, our June meeting.
Okay.
And Pam, is that the same type of thing as what Desmond Tutu?
I believe so. To be honest, I wanted to organize it because I don't know much about it, and it really, I always thought I planned to be cremated, but then the little that I've read about it is that there's a lot of different ways that you can do green burial, but you have to plan it in advance and let your family know, and they've got to be cool to do it. So I'm keen to hear about it. The thing about cremation is that there's nationwide services. So you can live wherever you want and pay for it now, whereas a green burial, I don't know that it's so wide yet in our nation that you can actually, you know, sign up for the service and be wherever and have it done. So those are some of the things I'm, you know, hoping to see and learn more about.
Thanks. Thanks. And if anybody else has anything they'd like to hear about, let us know. Pam, Chuck, and I, and Jerry are interested to give you the things that are interesting to you. And Haley, are you still there? You are. Do you want to just go briefly over some of the things that you put in the chat about what PAIPL is doing? So you talked about there's a rally on Thursday starting at noon. What's it a rally about? What are we rallying for?
That is for, let me find it in my notes. Climate justice and jobs rally in Philly at City Hall.
Okay.
I'm not directly working with that, but the other fellow that I'm working with is. There is information about it on the PAIPL Facebook page. So,
Okay. Okay, and you're looking for volunteers.
yeah, any volunteers that would want to, regular volunteers, that would be like 30+ minutes a month, that would want to write constant letters and emails to Cartwright, or I could also post in the chat the email for the other fellow for Philly for sending things to Biden.
That would be great.
Okay.
That'd be great. Thanks. Thanks for being with us.
And
Yeah,
I
no
just wanted
problem.
to, I just wanted to bring everyone's attention to something in the chat from Bert, who posted Green Burial, Our Last Best Act by Mallory McDuff. Is that a recent book, Bert?
Yes, it is. My wife just got it here. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it just came out this year. My wife just got it, so.
If I have time for a quick comment about
Yep.
cremations, maybe especially to Pam. In several large cities during COVID, during certain high periods, they banned having cremations in certain cities because when people are burned, things like mercury and so forth, you know, from dental stuff comes out in the air and it ruins the air quality. And there's actually a lot of pollution from people cremation that use a lot of carbon, so forth. So I want to mention that some people just are buried, you know, since we're a religious group, I think I can mention that, hey, a linen shroud was good enough for Jesus. Maybe something simple can work for other folks. Just throwing that out. But also some places have a burial setup that the human body acts as sort of the base or fertilizing piece for a freshly planted tree. And so that's maybe another way at looking at one's remains feeding the earth rather than whatever. So I'll just throw that out quickly. But I think that book sounds interesting that I think it was Bert mentioned. Yeah.
Can I just close this in prayer? I want to honor our time together, but I also want to honor the fact that we're a community that comes together because we feel called to do this work. So if we could pray. Creator of all good things, we thank you for your presence with us this evening. We ask that you bless us as we go from this place. Bless the people on this call, the families that are represented, the faith institutions that are here. God, send us out to do your good work in your creation, that we may be a blessing to the gifts that you have given us. Amen.
Thank you very much, Courtney.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
You're
Courtney.
the best.
Else.